Carp are very wary feeders. They're omnivorous, which means they are willing to eat other animals such as bugs, worms, even fish in some cases, but they will also forage in the weeds and even eat algae. Today we're going to take a look at the 10 best carp baits, where to use them and how to get the best out of them. Here we have a brilliant carp bait. Humans also eat bread, but in my opinion it's best on your hook. The great thing about bread is you can use the crust on the surface. You can also take the soft white bread from the middle and snug it tightly onto your hook. The bread will slowly sink. In some cases, slow sinking bread could be a very effective method. It draws adrenaline because you can't even see when the carp takes your bread. You just feel the tension and watch the line pull. In my local, there's also barbel. Slow sinking bread works amazingly for the barbel, but this video isn't about barbel, so let's stay on track. When choosing what bread you would like to use, I would stay away from brown seeded bread and instead try to find a soft white thick loaf. Spam is a very popular bait for fishing in murky water as it's full of oils and fats. I personally think it's super attractant. The other thing is it's not very resilient, so it's best used when you're pole fishing or maybe even float fishing, for example. Rather than hair rigging it and leaving it overnight, you'll definitely be waking up in the morning with a bait that has fallen off. However, if you're chopping it up into small chunks or mushing it up and feeding it into your swim and you want a more resilient hook bait that will stay on your rig for many hours at a time, that's where pepperoni comes into play. There is two types of pepperami, the green and the red. The green one isn't spicy, it actually isn't even that tasty. Pepperami is one of the bait I take fishing with me and I often don't end up using it because it's just too good and I end up eating it myself before I can even rig it up. Sweet corn. Sweet corn is definitely my weapon of choice. Carp just like sweet corn. I don't understand why. It's not something a fish would ever find in its natural habitat or environment. The frozen bags are much better value for money, however the tins have got a much better average size, like the pieces of corn are larger and they're much more resilient. So if you're putting corn on the hook, I would advise grabbing yourself a tin, or if you want it to last a long time without getting mouldy, then definitely stock up on the tins. However, if you're heavily baiting and throwing out large handfuls at a time, then the frozen bags come into play. Mixers. Mixers are floating dog biscuits. The mixers are the ones which are sort of round in shape and a perfect size to feed on the surface. They're a great bait for getting the fish feeding before you maybe introduce a bread hook bait. They're priced well and you can feed lots of them, and all round probably the best surface fishing bait. Particles. Particle bait is the word used to describe baits where you get lots of small seeds, beans, pulses or nuts, which can in many cases provide carp with an amazing food source. On certain lakes it will really produce lots of bites. Many people like to mix a certain selection of different particles together to create a sort of grubbing around mix, where the fish will come in and feed for a long period of time, trying to dig up every last capsule of food. For example, hemp seed, it's amazing, it's crunchy, the fish love eating it, it's very small so it gets stuck in the silt, so if you're trying to clear a certain spot, hemp will come into its own personality. And then there's tiger nuts. Tiger nuts are the most resilient particle bait. A hair-rigged tiger nut or 2 to 3 tiger nuts will stay on your rig for long periods of time. Tiger nuts also tend to avoid the bream. Last but not least, we have maize. It's super bright, it's also the cheapest type of particle, and you can afford to feed lots of it without costing the earth. Maggots, casters and worms come into their own during the winter months, when all the small fish are less active. The reason to this is because if you were to fish with maggots, for example, on a lake with lots of nuisance fish in the summer, those fish are so active, it wouldn't take more than 5 minutes for all your maggots to have been eaten. So these are more so for me, baits I use in the winter months. Let's start with maggots. Maggots can be hooked straight onto the hook and free-lined. They can be super glued to a piece of foam for the zig fisherman to give your zig the slightest bit of attraction. Maggots can also be used in PVA bags or put onto a maggot clip. Casters are what maggots look like once they have got a little bit further into becoming a fly. Because they don't wriggle, they are slightly less attractant to the little fish, but the carp, they love them. Worms. Worms are for me one of the best natural baits to fish for carp when you're stalking. So if you see a carp fizzing in the edge, or you see them cruising in the weeds, there's nothing more natural to present to them than a worm, or a bunch of worms slipped onto a hook. Now we have had a look at a whole load of baits so far, but the main drawback of most of them is that small fish can also get those baits and get them in their mouths. So how do you avoid those small fish and make sure when you get a run, it's a carp? This is where boilies come into play. Boilies are a man-made bait normally made out of eggs, flour and a few other powder ingredients. They are then rolled up, dropped into boiling water to make them firm, and then you can end up with those perfect little circles. They are easy to feed along distances, they go out well in a catapult, and they also deter small fish. You can almost guarantee if you get a run, it's a carp. The bigger the boilie, the bigger the average size of the carp. There are various sizes and flavours available, however I prefer to get confident using one boilie that I really like, and that is 5-Star Baits Fish Mix Boilie. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe for some more fishing content and facts? Tutorial? I don't know. Whatever you want to say, just like and subscribe, why not?